The Denver Communists presents In Defense of Leninism. Got a little intro here I'm going to do. So I was first introduced to Drapers Anatomy of the Microsect and Arguments Against Leninist Organization around last fall when we as a group are reading Mick Armstrong's From Little Things, Big Things Grow. Armstrong uses examples and historic struggles of Leninist propaganda groups and their involvement in bottom-up workers' movements. This propaganda group model is what the Denver Communists and other revolutionary socialist organizations are based on, which Draper and others in the left today argue against. So I want to discuss the tradition of Trotskyism that defends the Leninist conception of the party and challenge Draper's argument and others who use similar arguments in the left. So the relevance of Draper's argument of microsect panic relates to splits in Trotskyist organizations and other socialist organizations. Within the Denver Communists, we are part of the Revolutionary Socialist Organizing Project, and there was a debate within that group that related to this idea, which caused some folks to leave the organization. This has to do with the Leninist conception of the party. This argument gets into ideas of experimentation with socialism. Also, these kind of arguments are, still within socialist organization today. So, inspired by our last presenter, I did a little table of contents here. So I'm going to do a brief background of Trotskyism, talk about the Fourth International, arguments and splits, sectarianism, Hal Draper's microsect panic, and in defense of Leninism. So I'm kind of picking up from my last presentation where I was talking about how the Russian Revolution was lost. So just to kind of get into Trotsky, but Stalinism versus Trotskyism. Stalinism or Marxist-Leninism became the dominant interpretation of communism in the 20th century. This kind of gets into the stagist or two-stage theory of first having a bourgeois revolution and then later a social revolution. This theory is about socialism in one country. It often involves authoritarianism, top-down socialism, a one-party state, and exists still within capitalism and often tends, in the case of Russia under Stalin, engages in imperialism, war, and hegemony. So Trotsky, his theory developed in response to this, but it further developed Marx and Engels' idea of permanent revolution, and he opposed Stalin. He said that a bourgeois revolution is not needed before a socialist revolution. He was for internationalism as opposed to socialism in one state, for bottom-up socialism by connecting with the working class, the self-emancipation of the working class, and the defending the Leninist conception of the party. The development of Trotskyism. So Trotsky was in the left opposition in the Communist Party during the Stalin years and had his followers. I said that the bureaucratic degeneration, or he often talked about the bureaucratic degeneration of the Russian state, so often what he argued against. He tried to defend democracy within the party, tried to strengthen the proletarian base. He said that Bolshevism is the history of a struggle of factions. He was against the one-party state. And then often, as we'll see, he was vilified within the Communist Party in Russia and internationally. So some further notes I have on that is that the bureaucracy arose from the exhaustion of the working class. The composition of the party changed with the influx of newer, inexperienced revolutionaries throughout the Stalin years. And by inter-party democracy, Trotsky is referring to the Leninist idea of democratic centralism. Factions, he says, factions and parties, he says, are necessary at times for making arguments. And being against the one-party state, he was for the idea of having multiple parties. Going on from there, him being vilified within the Communist Party and internationally, found this, which appears to be like some sort of movie against Trotsky and Bolshevism, so it's like a flyer for it or something. But the Fourth International, Trotsky founded the Fourth International, but faced a lot of challenges. He was trying to build this international gradually. It was small, and it never became a mass organization like the second and third internationals were. It was, the composition of it was a lot of petty bourgeoisie class. Didn't have a working class base at the time. There was factionalism. There was splits, as we'll get into. And there's a lot of organizations who identify as Fourth International Trotskyist who tend towards sectarianism. One issue too is that Trotsky made a lot of predictions that just didn't happen. So he predicted that like the capitalist economy would collapse after World War II. This didn't happen, and a lot of Trotskyists developed the idea of the permanent arms economy. The Soviet Union, he said that the Soviet Union wouldn't survive the war, and they did. Stalin was able to squeeze the working class and the army to survive through the war. Capitalism, as we saw from history, because Trotsky died in 40 or 39, that capitalism and Stalinism were more adaptable than he had originally thought. I've got a quote here. So despite like some of Trotsky's predictions that didn't happen, John Molyneux says, a balanced view must recognize the immense achievement of Trotsky in defending and preserving the Marxist and Leninist traditions of party democracy, of the party as a collective and living organism against enormous odds, without collapsing, as so many others did, either into social democratic or anarchist rejection of democratic centralism in the vanguard party. There's the Fourth International. So I just want to briefly talk about the degenerated worker state argument, because it's a big one that caused a lot of splits within the Fourth International and Trotskyist organizations in general. Trotsky held that Russia was still a workers' state, but had been degenerated by the Stalinist bureaucracy. But the contradiction was there were a lot of Eastern European states were very very much just copies of Stalinist states, and they didn't involve a working class revolution or a working class base. These were like more bourgeois type of revolutions. So this idea kind of contradicts that you have these same kind of states, so-called socialist states existing, but without a working class revolution. So by using a Marxist analysis, a lot of Trotskyists came to this idea of state capitalism, and that these Eastern European states are state capitalists, and if they are, also Russia would be. This argument caused a major break amongst Trotskyists. A lot of Orthodox Trotskyists have a lot of this like Fourth International rigidity, where they hold on to different kind of ideas. So there's a lot of debate within some of those organizations. I look forward to in the discussion if folks have thoughts on some of that. In talking about sectarianism, Marx and Engels in the Communist Manifesto say They, the communists, do not set up sectarian principles of their own by which to shape and mold the proletarian movement. This is in John Molyneux. Oh, sorry. John Molyneux's book. He talks about two different kinds of sectarianism. This extreme dogmatic sectarianism of where they, the organization will proclaim leadership of the working class, claim to possess the correct theory or the correct line. In some of the articles, they refer to this as blackboard socialism. So being, more about focusing on recruiting on a high level of theory, which often tended to exclude the working class. And that's kind of more reflective of this second one, the petty bourgeois opportunism. Sorry about that. But that they lack a connection to the working class and have these sophisticated academic discussion groups, and they are the ones who are recruiting on a high level of theory, which is exclusive. With the top group, the more dogmatic groups, a lot of them just didn't have a base and did not connect with working class movements. Hal Draper was an American Trotskyist, part of the Fourth International when he was younger. He wrote some important works, The Two Souls of Socialism, about the idea of socialism from below, which is, an idea that as the Denver communists we identify with, the self-emancipation of the working class. But despite this, he held some un-Marxist ideas, had, as some, Brian Bean and Kahn say in their articles, had an undeveloped understanding of Bolshevism. He unsuccessfully tried to form his own organization, the ISC. Going into his anatomy of a microsect. So as Brian Bean and Kahn point out in the articles, that he correctly criticizes small sectarian groups, but he equates propaganda groups to sects and argues it is impossible to build a revolutionary party via the propaganda group. That's a quote from Armstrong of Draper's view. Draper claims that the Bolsheviks were not a sect and not a membership organization. And this kind of goes into some of his lack of understanding of some of the Bolshevik organization, in that they were a membership organization at times and did make hard arguments. This is another quote from Armstrong this is Draper's view. They, the Bolsheviks, were simply a political center cohered around a paper within a broader party. So expanding more on that, in this idea of the experimentation with socialism, Draper's vision was of having a broad political center, these informal socialist circles centered around a publication with no membership, abandoning Bolshevism in favor of experimentation, using more of a pragmatic approach versus the Marxist dialectical materialist approach, saying, feeling that theory is not as important or more secondary to other things. This would tend towards eclecticism. And as some of the authors talk about, Armstrong talks about this idea of American exceptionalism, of like things are different in America, so organization's going to look different. Draper's vision was really of like vaguely socialist ideas. And in this idea of like experimentation, I really like this Trotsky quote, that was in one of the articles. You want to experiment, but permit me to remind you that the workers' movement possesses a long history with no lack of experience, and if you prefer, experiments. This experience so dearly bought has been crystallized in the shape of a definite doctrine, the very Marxism whose name you so carefully avoid. So in defense of Leninism, oh, I should go back. What I was going to add to this was Draper's political center did not pan out. While the U.S. International Socialists, who are Fourth International Group, did at that time engage in important trade union work, which Bean talks about in his article. And there was a lot of working class involvement with the UK International Socialist and Socialist Socialist Workers Party from 71 to 74 that they shaped within the shop stewards movement. These publications that Draper talks about, lastly, these publications are not managed by democratic means, which a lot of other socialist groups would do, and as Bean points out, are unelected. Coming back to in defense of Leninism, we should argue for a socialist propaganda group as the Leninist method for building a revolutionary party. As Armstrong talks about in his article, being involved, what a propaganda group does or is involved in a broad range of activity, recruit on the basis of ideas, develop theory through discussion, engage in propaganda, which could be writing, posters, banners, memes, things like that, following democratic organizational principles with debate and discussion, making hard arguments using a dialectical materialist perspective and analysis, connecting with working class struggles, and being in the tradition of Marx, Engels, Lenin, Trotsky, and Luxemburg, and others who engaged in revolutionary struggle. I wanted to end with this quote, which I really like. Bolshevism's most precious fundamental tactical quality is its unequaled aptitude to orient itself rapidly, to change tactics quickly, to renew its armament, and to apply new methods. In a word, to carry out abrupt turns. And I really appreciate in this of getting away from Marxism as being this rigid set of ideas and being something that can adapt to different situations and change direction, while still being Marxist and using a materialist analysis. So here are four of the things that I cited from these first two are articles that were on our website, and from Mick Armstrong's from Little Things, Big Things Grow, and then Trotsky's Dual Legacy from John Mullinger.